Wondering how you can become better at running your business? Entrepreneurship can be stressful. There's too much to do and not enough time. If you're isolated in your daily decisions, have no fear. Success and balance are possible. Welcome to the Small Business Answer Man podcast, where you master the art of running a successful business using practical advice from experts who want to help you succeed. Now, here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Well, we are early in 2023, but I'm telling you what, we've got a topic today that I think everyone's interested in because April 15th is coming up. Well, this year you actually get to April 18th, but that's called that tax day. And as a small business and entrepreneur, you know that day is coming up. And this is a way to help you prepare for it. So my guest with us today is Tony, and Tony's going to share with us what problem he's going to solve for the Small Business Answer podcast listeners today.
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem a lot of small businesses and a lot of folks in general, even if you don't have a business, is just the fear of failure, right? There's a lot of fear out there in society today, and especially for the small businessman, the fear of starting a business, losing money, right? That's always in your thoughts, right? If you're a failure, what is your family going to think, right? And, just the fear of failure because maybe you don't have the right knowledge or skill set for that particular business that you want to start. So there's definitely for the small businessman, that fear of failure always residing in the back of our minds.
Tony, I appreciate you sharing that because that is a challenge for him. But today, Tony Lopes, he's an uber successful real estate investor. He's retired at 44 and is now helping others achieve their life of freedom and abundance. He has a new book called Freedom at Risk: How to Protect Your Personal and Financial Freedoms, that shares some of the ways you can live your best life. Tony, it is great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on, Gary. I truly appreciate you.
Well, let's talk a little bit and get into this. We talked about fear of failure that you talked about, and business owners have it. And I think sometimes what happens is once we have gotten past that 3 to 5 year mark, we may be past it for ourselves, but then it becomes, we're worried about it for our team and our employees and the people that we hire. So I think that's so important. So when you think about what was your biggest fear that you had and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, my biggest fear started pretty early on in my career, after I had graduated from college. I wasn't specifically thinking about this, but one of my biggest values that I carry with me is a value for freedom. Right? I want to be free to do what I want, when I want, for the most part, right? I understand I have to work and do certain things, pay my taxes and be a good citizen. But certainly, I wanted to maximize my freedom. And so I had done all the right things as a young adult. I had gone to school, I got my degree. I got a degree in mechanical engineering, so somewhat, you thought, okay, an engineering degree, you'll be set, right? So I went to school just like my parents told me to do. Go to school, get a degree, you'll get a good job, which I got a good job, and you'll be set for the rest of your life, right? That was the mantra. That's what they taught me, and that's what I did. But unfortunately, about 4 years after I graduated from college with my degree, I got that good job, but then I got laid off. And I was like, wait a minute. Ooh, this hurts. This wasn't part of the plan. Nowhere in that mantra of go to school, get an education, get a good job, you're set for life. Nowhere in there was you're going to get laid off. And so right there, I realized, wow, my freedom is really being impacted. So for me, what I started to do was, well, first of all, I had to get another job, right? Because I wasn't independently wealthy. I didn't have multiple income streams, right? So for me, I had to get another job, which I did. Fortunately, I landed another good job. But at that point, I realized I needed to insulate myself from just this one job. I needed to be able to create some cash flow to protect my freedom, right? So that I could do the things I wanted to do, have the time and have the money to do those things. So in addition to, having my job, I also started in real estate, right? That was huge for me as a young person. I started early and did that. Also, for folks who aren't interested in real estate, part of what I did was I also started investing in stocks and things like that that offered a dividend, right? So I got some cash flow from, a dividend each quarter, right? And then for some other folks that I share this story with, if any of those things aren't, you don't resonate with, that's okay. A lot of folks start a side business or a side hustle when they're working their W-2 job, which is great, right? Start a side. There's Uber, there's Lyft, there's Etsy where you can sell stuff. There's Pinterest, right? There's so many different outlets where people can start a side hustle or a small business, right? I share the message um, with a police officer that I know, and we were going through the same story, and he's like, "Yeah, I work my job. I'm a police officer." Da, da, da. And I'm like, "Well, what about starting a small business for yourself?" And he's kind of like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, you know, how about starting like a security company?" Somebody who can go in and assess a homeowner's property to say, hey, you should have some cameras up in this area of your house, or you should use a different lock set on your door, right? For me as a homeowner, if I could go to somebody who has that knowledge and that years of experience as a police officer who sees these things day to day, wow, that's incredibly valuable to me. Who knows how burglars break into a home, what lock sets are better than others, where security cameras are more effective. That's intrinsic knowledge that he carries as a police officer that he can just explode into a small business on nights and weekends, installing cameras and advising homeowners to protect their belongings, protect their freedom at the end of the day. So it just really blew his mind that he could do something like this. And he was carrying this knowledge with him that he didn't even know. And it was just so powerful. It was just, I guess I get goosebumps telling the story because it was so fascinating to see him come alive.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you talked about because it's that second source of income. And, a lot of my listeners are small business owners and entrepreneurs. And the only thing, even when I work with them, I find out they think their business is their pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And for a lot of people, it is. I'll be honest. I had a business for 22 years in the wireless industry and was able to sell it in 2012. And there was a nice pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But sometimes they wait too long and then that pot of gold goes away. And that's what I love what you talked about, because if it's investing in real estate or a second source, or a side business, they have to decide what that is, or investing in the stock market. We're not telling you what to do. What we're trying to give you is examples that you've got to start doing that, because if not, you got to have more than one source of income. It's about diversification. And I guess give me your feelings and thoughts about diversification. I don't care if it's a business owner or not. Same thing you're talking about. Even if you're employed by somebody, you should have some diversification of income.
Absolutely. I was just having a conversation with a client earlier today, and we were talking. I use the example of, I personally don't care if somebody has $100 million in the bank, right? That's irrelevant because we don't live off the money we have in the bank for the most part, right? We live off of the cash flow, the dividends that this so to speak money creates for us. So for me, I look at it and I say, am I really going to get cash flow that I can live off of? Am I going to get that off of money that's in the bank, right? Some people are very proud to say, hey, I have, $1 million, $5 million sitting in the bank for my retirement. But, I I try to share with them, we're in a place in time right now where you want to be able to invest that money into different assets, not keep it stored in the bank, invest it into other assets that are going to kick off cash, for you each and every month or each and every quarter, right? This is why, I share with people, obviously I love real estate, right? I was able to retire at 44 doing real estate, and that's primarily what I do now in terms of coaching people and helping people start their own active real estate business or get into syndications, right? It kind of goes back to one of the things I was talking about. Some folks who have this fear, this paralysis, this procrastination. You don't have to have that. Go to others who have that knowledge, who have that experience to get you started, right? And in many cases, in my world, it's starting folks in a syndication so they can start getting that second income on top of their W-2 job, right? Getting that second income from real estate in terms of more cash flow, such that, eventually, you know, we're in very interesting times right now, right? With the economy. I just heard this morning, Microsoft is laying off some engineers and people. We heard that Amazon was laying off. There's a lot of layoffs going on right now. Who knows who's going to be targeted next? But if you lose your job, at least now you have a second source of cash flow coming in to your home to be able to at least put food on the table and, pay for heat and electricity, right?
Well, you've consulted with a lot of others and you say that's what you do, and you've shared that. But what have you found? You've talked a little bit about this, but what have you found is their people's biggest fears? Because you've talked about some of the layoffs and that side of it. Is that what you see? Is their fear of, that position that, same way as a business owner, I talked about their pot of gold, but, the problem is if you only have one source of income and these people that's getting laid off, that income's gone then.
Yeah, I see a lot of different fears out there, right? The fear of losing money, the fear of, what is your family going to think about you if you're not successful, the fear of not being able to be successful in your own mind because you don't have that knowledge, right? There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. And and I think this is, so I'm going to share something that I think we can all relate to. We as humans, we tell ourselves these stories to ourselves. We build up these fears, these stories in our mind, and each and every day we add to them, right? Until at the end of the day, right, a year from now, we've built up this super fantastic fictional story in our mind of how we're going to fail, how it's not going to work, and it's just not true. But we do it to ourselves. And so we have to get around that. We have to start tearing down those stories that we've told told to ourselves over the years on how we can't be successful. Because that's a lie. We do need help, right? We do need help along the way. I have folks that help me in my business, right? I have a business consultant, I have VAs, I have other people that I surround myself to be successful. I need to, I realize that. And I think everyone else needs to realize that as well. There's a lot of fear right now because of what's going on in the economy. Interest rates have been going up. Should I sell my house? Should I buy a new house? Should I move to a different state? What's going to happen with inflation? What's going to happen with my job? There's a lot of different fear. And I think we need to be reaching out these days to different people, to different sources, whether it's reading a book or whether it's watching a YouTube channel that talks about the economic conditions, right? We need to be seeking alternate sources to be able to get out of our own way and kind of condemn some of those fears and start replacing it with actual knowledge that we can take action on, which is so important to take action.
I love that, Tony, because I tell you, them stories, they get built up, and boy, what happens is, they become the belief that we carry in. And for a lot of business owners, what they're seeing right now, it's early in 23. So the challenge they have is, they maybe had a really good year last year.
Mm.
But because of everything they're hearing on the news and everything they pick up, everything says, we're going into a recession or we're in a recession, whatever words you want to use. And they say right away that their business is going to go tank.
Yeah.
And the only thing is what do they believe? And I
Yeah.
joke, but at one time in my business, I remember around the 2008, 2009 recession, and I went into my staff and we always had an all staff training early in January. And I said, okay, I said, I want to let you all know the recession, it's not going to affect us because
Yeah.
I decided not to participate. And they
Yeah.
all laughed and joked. And I said, no, I'm serious. We are not going to participate in it. So let's go out there and do what we've got to do in sales to make things happen and make our business grow and make it go, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's going to happen. If you sit there back and say something bad's going to happen, normally what happens? Something bad happens. So it's looking on that positive side.
I love that. You face into it, right? You face into it and you take action, whatever that action is, to insulate yourself from it, right? You know what that is for your business. I know what that is for my business, and every other small business owner out there needs to do the same thing. They need to face into it and say, how do I solve this equation, right? And so for me, in real estate, I'll give you the example. Again, another recent conversation I was having, I have a single family home down in Florida that I'm looking to sell. Right. We purchased a couple of homes down there. And so for me, it wasn't going to be a residence for me. But for me, I say, there's an expression where, you can stand on the edge of a coin and look to one side and look to the other side. What if this happens? And what if this happens? And create a plan for either of those scenarios. So for me, selling that home, if the market, so to speak, disappears and there's no more buyers, well, that's one side of the coin that I got to look at and say, well, I'm not going to be able to sell the home. But the other side of the coin is, well, I'll just rent it, right? And I'll just cash flow from renting that property. So for me, my head doesn't hurt about that. I don't have to sell. If I sell, okay, that's great. I sell and I go move that money, that investment someplace else. Okay. But if it doesn't sell, I'll just rent it. So I try to help people along with that. I do a lot with real estate, but with the small businesses, I do that same sort of exercise. Put yourself in that lifeboat and say, if my business is going to be affected, what sort of things are important to me that I need to pack in that lifeboat? And what do I need to do to have in that lifeboat so that I survive?
Yeah, I agree. Well, one thing before we've got to wrap up, one thing I want to ask is, because we've talked about fears of others having everything, what's some of your current fears today that keeps you kind of awake at night, and how are you addressing that?
Wow, that's a loaded question of sorts. Look, I think a lot of folks, your listeners are very smart people, right? A lot of them are, small business owners. They understand what's happening, domestically with our political system. It's kind of hard to understand and trust our politicians these days. So we have issues there. Beyond that, we have geopolitical issues that are affecting us, with energy and with food and with oil, right? So we have these geopolitical issues. We have economic issues in our own country we already spoke, inflation, and with unemployment potentially increasing in the future here in 2023, right? And also, we have societal type issues, right? Which are huge, which I think go to some degree unnoticed in terms of how they impact us, right? I mean, not to go too far off the trail there, but we've forgotten how to classify what a man is and what a woman is, right? That's a societal issue. I mean, that's pretty basic to understand that, but we've convoluted that as a society, right? Separately, religion. We've, for the most part, lost religion in our society. And I'm not a big religious person. I don't, so to speak, preach, no pun intended, about religion. But I don't think anybody can argue that religion doesn't bring goodness to society, right? Religion teaches us a lot of good things about our values, right? Which values to have, how to treat people, right? How to care for others, right? We have a society today that is very me, me, me. What's in it for me, right? Whereas religion, to a great extent, teaches about others, how to help others. And so just, not to go off on a society rant, but we have a lot of issues with society. So what keeps me up at night? Yeah, it's a loaded question. There's a lot of different things at play that keeps me, so to speak, up at night. Again, I understand it. I do things, take action, right? Which is so important for people, take action to insulate myself from those things. So what am I doing, right? We all understand there's different dynamics in different states. So I actually have two residencies now. I have in two different states, or I should say homes. I have a primary residence in New Hampshire, and then I have a secondary residence down in Florida. So to me, that offers some amount of protection because I'm a descendant of Portuguese immigrants. I'm also working to get my second passport in citizenship for Portugal, which allows me access into the entire European Union. So that gives me more potential freedoms in the future. We've already spoken about multiple income streams. I think that's something easy that everyone should be working on, right? Even things like having different forms of money. We all talk about the dollar, but we should also consider having a certain amount of precious metals in our portfolio, right? Whether it be gold, silver, platinum, whatever, we should have a certain amount of that. We should also start to take a look at assets as a form of holding wealth, right? Whether it's real estate or in a business of some sort, right? We should look at those assets as a form of money and holding our wealth, as well as, I'm not here to advise people on stocks or bonds or anything like that, but not for nothing, I don't think Microsoft is going anywhere. I don't think Amazon is going anywhere. I don't think JP Morgan is going anywhere, right? There's a lot of big name companies out there that are going to be here 10, 20, 30 years from now. So as far as holding wealth, that may be an option for folks. And then for some folks I share, if none of that resonates with you, that's okay. I also, I enjoy having a garden, right? That gives me such peace and such joy to be able to have some quiet time in my garden, right? Because there's a lot of noise happening out there in the media, on the streets. Every time you turn around, somebody's complaining about something, the world is going to end. Being in my garden gives me such peace and joy, and that's low cost, easy to do, as well as working out. I try to work out each and every day, have a healthy mind, have a healthy body. Working out, I think, helps immensely. And also meditation. I spoke about religion, and some folks, religion, that's great. If you have a church or a synagogue or a temple or someplace you go to practice your religion and that gives you peace and joy, God bless you. That's great. Enjoy it, right? For others, try meditation. Go to a place of calm and of peace where you can, rejuvenate your thoughts. So those are all things that I do to overcome my fear of all the doom and gloom that's happening around us.
Yeah. Well, Tony, I appreciate you sharing that. Lot we could get into there. Our time is wrapping up, so we don't have time, but I do want to share with the audience because I have read Tony's book. It's Freedom at Risk. How to protect your personal and financial freedoms. I highly would recommend it myself because I can tell you that because I've read it, because he really gets into, you just got tidbits of what he talked about, but he really gets into the personal and financial freedoms and how to do it, how to really think about it. you gave us some great examples, and he didn't talk about the book, but basically he was talking about concepts that he's put in the book, and that's where you can see that he's already came up with that. So Tony, I wish you well. It's a great read and a lot of great information, and I love how you kind of really set it up in the beginning, and then you talk about ways that you can put it in place, just kind of like what we did in the podcast here, of ways that you can do. You've got to decide what works for you. Tony said real estate worked for him. That may not be your thing. That's fine if it's not. So decide what it is, but decide how you're going to create that passive income. Him and I are both a believer. We've got introduced by a mutual friend because we both have rental properties, and he thought we needed to know each other. And I was so excited to bring Tony on the podcast. So Tony, thanks for your information.
Well, thank you. This has been a great experience, and I certainly hope I've helped some of your listeners out there. And I encourage folks to take action in 2023. If there's something you need to do, start taking action.
Yeah. And then his website is dirtybootscapital.com. So if you want to check him out, check there. He's on LinkedIn, all the social medias. We'll have that all in show notes. So you can check that at Small Business Answer Man Podcast. .biz. So check out that. We'll have all the notes that's available for you, so you can link to Tony, be able to connect with him and everything else. Now, before I let you go, though, I have one quick question I want to ask you is, what is one business tip you would give small business owners and entrepreneurs?
So the big tip that I share with folks, and I've experienced it myself, was, going back to this fear, right? If we have a fear that we have in our lives, in our business, whatever it is, typically that fear leads to procrastination of some sort, right? And if you have that happening in your business, in your life, ask yourself, is that procrastination happening because you don't have the right skill set to solve that problem, to overcome that fear? Ask yourself that question. I've done it in my business, and it's helped me tremendously, because what it helps with is I answer the question, no, that procrastination exists because I don't have the right skill set to solve it. So now what I do is I take action, and I've been going to find those right people with the right skill set to help me be successful, solve that problem, answer that fear, and move on with life. So if you have something you have a fear on, and you're procrastinating on doing something, please ask yourself that very simple question: why am I procrastinating? Is it because I don't have the skill set? And if the answer is you don't have the skill set, then go find somebody who does, and partner with them to solve it.
Yeah, and today there's so many resources. You can learn anything. So go out and make that happen. I'll just leave it here. Remember, check out his book, Freedom at Risk. Make sure you check out his book. We'll have the notes that you can get to it. If you want to check out his website, dirtybootscapital.com. Check that out. We'll have it all in show notes at smallbusinessanswerman.biz. So remember, check out those resources for you. Tony, it's been great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Listeners, I'm going to give you this answer, this action. I always talk about an action afterwards, is now take action. Key in on what Tony talked about. What is holding you back right now? It's early in 2023. What is holding you back right now? Identify it. Instead of having fear about it, take action on solving it this year. Make it a great day. Come back next week and we'll have another great guest for you. Thanks for joining us.
That's all the time we have for this week. To continue your journey, head over to smallbusinessanswerman.biz to access the tools and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who would benefit from listening. That's smallbusinessanswerman.biz. Until next time, remember, when you find the right solutions, your business grows and you get your time back.